A piece of malling and two klimpan wouldn't do the trick. I'm going back to basic.
6:18 in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're waiting for the green light in the area of the Central Market to head into downtown Port-au-Prince. That's from the other side, from the eastern side. We had a look from the western side, and certainly the traffic is quite heavy, but it isn't that intolerable when it's moving along, as it appears to be at this hour of the morning. So let's move along, because housing continues to be in high demand in Trinidad and Tobago, as you would expect, and affordable accommodation seems to be a dwindling dream for many. In 2018, that's last year, the government announced the launch of housing bonds to fund the HDC construction. And in May of this year, said that the bonds will be available in multiples of $5,000, which was approved by Cabinet at a sum of $1 billion. Is this enough to help pump some much needed life into the housing and construction sectors? Well, we're joined by the former president of the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry, Afra Raymond. He's also, as we mentioned in our introduction earlier this morning, a tremendous advocate for financial accountability and greater accountability in many areas of public life in Trinidad and Tobago. And we identified CLICO, we identified sandals, we've identified a number of other things that he would have tried to champion in the public domain. But he's here with us this morning as we try to frame much of our discussion in relation to the budget presentation that we're expecting from the Finance Minister on October the 7th. Afra, good to see you once again.
Morning, Fazeer.
Thanks very much.
Always a pleasure
for joining us.
Although I'm always a bit nervous at the beginning with you.
Why?
Well, you know, you sort of upset all of your guests. You know, you have a way to ask questions, and that's welcome. It's good to have interviewers of your caliber. It's like having bowlers of a certain caliber, you know.
I'm not so gullible as to fall for that. That piece I set up this hour of the morning. I ain't wearing a bride's gown or anything, or waiting for any expensive shoes to be sent for me.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning to you. I mean, let's try and put it in a budgetary context. Given what we usually expect from a budget presentation, when we talk about housing and so on, the issue of the Chinese contract comes to mind almost immediately, and you hear all the different spins being put on it. From the point of view of a budget, do you expect the budget to offer us any clarity, any direction, any incentives to stimulate the housing sector in any real way?
Well, I expect those things to be mentioned, because certainly it seems that the government has been embarrassed into withdrawing or cancelling the contract with
China. Of course, they are saying very differently. They say they looked at different elements, and it's really some minor
Sure.
issue.
It's not anything minor. It was embarrassment, because the deal was signed.
And the agency said they've done nothing illegal.
Well, that's not even the point. The deal was signed and sealed by the chairman of the HDC and by the CEO of the HDC, the chairman being Newman George, who is the husband of the House Speaker, Bridget Said George, and the CEO of HDC, which is Mr. Brent Lyons. They were signed by the both gentlemen, and the document is now available because my colleagues at JCC applied under the Freedom of Information Act to get that document. And the HDC, to their credit, because it's one of the few public organizations that behaves in an exemplary fashion where this is concerned, the JCC, to its credit, the HDC, to its credit, published the document. So we've had a chance to look at it, and it's clear that the document was signed by the authorized high-level officials. So the attempt to escape responsibility is not even amusing, you know, between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance and the Attorney General, and the HDC has no further comment. And so it's kind of macabre, you know. People were doing something in the dark, and the light came on, and that is why the contract was withdrawn. I expect the budget statement to contain the usual proposals and assurances and so on, those that we have come to expect in budgets over the years. I don't expect much of an explanation in terms of what has happened with that Chinese contract.
And therefore, moving forward, when we talk about the housing sector, and as we said in our introduction, we appreciate that the need for housing is past critical in Trinidad and Tobago. We go through these routines every so often where we interview people who say, well, they've been waiting for 20 years, they've been waiting for 25 years, and they keep seeing other people come in and getting houses. Then they're asking, are houses really being built for those who could, for the lower to middle classes, when they're being quoted for what would appear to be astronomical sums. So as someone who would have been intimately involved with the construction sector, I don't know how much you're closely involved with it now, but are we making any headway as far as transparency, accountability, delivery in the housing sector?
Well, the current proposal, the one that, pardon me, the one that has all the attention with the Chinese Gazuba Group company, is actually a very interesting paradox, because we had a situation where the contract was signed and sealed. Yes, it was put in place, and then so it was handled with a relative amount of discretion. And then on the other hand, the HGC has a stance which is admirable to disclose information if they get a Freedom of Information request. So it was published.
Right.
Now, when we look at it, we could see that in fact, for all of that money that was invested, it was 5,000 new homes that would be built in the overall program at a cost of about $5.5 billion Trinidad dollars, and not one of those houses is going to be affordable. So let's be very clear, viewers. Not a
And
single.
when you say not affordable, let's define
Okay,
what you
let's
mean
break
by
it
that.
down.
Yeah.
The average price per home was about $1.1 million plus. Okay, $1.1 million implies a mortgage of about $1 million. A mortgage of $1 million implies a monthly income of $18,000 plus, and the national average household income is $9,000. So we can't be describing it as affordable if in fact what you're building is priced for people who earn 2 times the national average. To describe it as affordable is nothing but a straight out lie. And if it is doing the project again, Dr. Rowley and them want to redraw the contract, what you need to do is either you cross a line to that thing at the head of the contract where you say affordable housing, cross that out, because you're not building affordable housing anymore. But that takes you into further difficulties, because the HDC is functioning under the remit of the HGC Act, Act number 24 of 2005, which mandates them to build affordable housing. And the fact of the matter is, you can't be operating under a mandate in America, they'd call it a charter. You can't be operating under a mandate and spending public money in a manner which is in violation of that charter. There's a real serious question about affordability and legality at the heart of this whole thing. It doesn't matter whether the contract was legally signed and it was the correct board resolution and cabinet approved it. No cabinet approval, no board resolution, no sign-off by the AG could cure the fact that those homes, none of them were affordable. It cannot cure the breach of the HGC Act. And that's why it's important to have statutory agencies and we observe what is the originating law.
So what was the point of the exercise then? If it is that, as you were saying, based on your perusal of the necessary documents, that the average cost was going to be 1.1 million, which takes it out of the realm of affordability.
Oh, absolutely.
What was the point of the exercise?
Well, I don't want to speculate. I mean, all I could say to you, Fazeer, respectfully, all I could rejoinder to you is that the next time you get somebody like the Minister of Housing, like the Chairman of the HGC, like the CEO of the HGC, anybody in a position of responsibility to have conceived and put this sort of thing in place, you need to ask them that question. What was the purpose of all of that activity and all of that commitment? Because a contract is a commitment. All of that commitment, if in fact not one affordable house is going to be created, that's a question for them. But I've identified it, I've analyzed it, the numbers don't lie. None of those homes were going to be affordable. And that's really a serious question we need to be putting our minds to, because let me take us into the realm of possibility and not just dreaming. Let's put into the realm of possibility likelihood. If we were to create homes that had a lower cost, $400,000, $375,000. We could, for that same $5.5 billion, we could produce 15, 16, 17,000 affordable homes that could actually have an impact on the poorer people on the waiting list. But as it is, we were producing 5,000 homes for people near to the top of the waiting list who in no way, shape or form could be deemed as qualifying affordable homes. No, they are not affordable homes.
And just so
Yes.
we could understand
Sure.
it, just break down the numbers as to what would be the mortgage, what would be the minimum, what the
Sure,
salary
sure,
requirement.
sure.
So if we're talking about 375,000,
Yeah.
400,000, because some people might be arguing, what do you get for 375? Do you like a one room with a cheap roof and halfway done roof, that sort of thing?
First of all, let us be clear, we're not talking about a grand home. For $375,000 and $400,000, we're describing a modest home. And let me answer your concerns you raised by saying that right now in this country, and right now listen to this show, there are people who know people or they themselves have built homes in that range, 400,000, 375, 275, modest homes. No, they are not fancy. No, they're not like anything you see on TV, on a home show on TV.
HGTV and that kind of thing.
HGTV, they're not anything like that. But we can build modest homes. We can raise our families in those modest homes. They don't have to cost $1 million point anything. And the big question for Fazeer is this. If there are people in this country, modest people, hardworking people, honest people, who can put together a home for $375 and $350, and they have no big set of qualified people working with them, how did our housing department, which is what the HDC is, with hundreds of qualified people, they spent $12 billion of public money in the last 16 years doing this housing program. How is it that all we're hearing from them is $1 million point something and 875 and $1.2 million? This is nonsense. The next time they come on here, I want people like yourself in the media to ask them, where are the designs for 250? Where are the designs for 350? Where are the designs for 400,000? Do your work and bring forward a substantial number of those homes so that the poorer citizens have an opportunity to be housed. The actual details of how many windows and how many doors and how many bedrooms. For example, I'm aware of a project, just one project I could discuss for a second.
Yes.
I'm aware of a project in South Trinidad, a community project, where people are building 3-bedroom homes for $250. Okay. I'm also aware that an official at HEC, he knows who he is, wrote me last year. I have an email from him where he said to me, Afra, we're working on a model, some models between $250 and $275. Where are those homes? What is this $1 million story? Okay, where are those homes? Okay, another person was telling me about a 3-bedroom home that was built, and I'm a practitioner, so I'm seeing this all the time in my work.
Yeah.
That it is possible to produce cheaper units, but it just appears that somehow our HDC and our political class appear to have become caught up in this multi-million-dollar thing, and we need to break out of that. If we have public resources that have been raised by tax and are being spent under the remit of the HDC Act, those public resources have to be directed to affordable homes, and those homes have to be affordable to people who earn less than the average income. And that is the driving message here.
And just to finish off on that point, if we're talking about those homes, those affordable homes within the range 375, 400, maybe a bit less, what would be the salary requirements for you to qualify for a mortgage at that level?
Well, that kind of thing you're talking about $5,000 to $7,000. That kind of thing under $9,000. That is the kind of thing you're talking about. And in fact, let us be clear again, Fazeer, just because we're seeking clarity in this dialogue between ourselves. Let us be clear that what we're speaking about is not necessarily a situation where every home is sold. What we're at least looking after is a situation where, in fact, a larger part of them could be rented. But the main point is affordable to people on a modest income. That is the main point.
And in broadening our discussion and taking it back to the budget presentation, and that's why I wonder, Afra, and which is why I always appreciate whenever you do take the time to be with us on the show. Since the time of CLICO 10 years ago up at CNMG when we were discussing these same things, are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Are we getting any closer towards transparency and accountability in the use of public money? From your own experience, CLICO, Sandals, this HDC thing, and so many other things in between. What is your sense? Well,
that's a twisty one. I would like to say yes. And the reason I'd like to say yes, and maybe this is me being aspirational or optimistic or dreamy or sentimental or something, is I look at the procurement law, which I understand is due to come into effect within the next month or so. I look at the procurement law and I look at it as being a major step in rectifying some of these issues that we are touching on, okay? And I also think that Trinidad and Tobago, from my information, is suffering because of its diminishing status in terms of the world's financial regulations. You know, in terms of our disqualification for this and our disqualification from that. There's an unfortunate phrase they use, blacklisting, which of course I wouldn't use. That's a little negative and racist, but there's an unfortunate phrase they use in relation to the various financial centers in the world, and all of that flows from our failure to prosecute anybody. So we discuss an international financial center. It's been discussed now for 10 to 15 years. A lot of eminent people are involved in it, and Trinidad is going to be an international financial center. Of course, we know that all those buildings have now been devoted to ministries, and now there's courts going to be down there, Twin Towers next to Hyatt. And there's not going to be an international financial center, because looking from the outside, you see, when we're looking from here, we can see things parochially, the UNC this and the PNM that and so. But looking from the outside, you have a country this big, which had a scandal in the shape of CL that was this big. Everybody knew who was on the board of this and who was on the board of that and who did certain things and so on. And nobody's been arrested. So in one snapshot, an analyst or a critical person preparing a report on whether to go into Trinidad and Tobago has it all there in one snapshot.
Okay, one question on that.
Sure.
No one has been arrested. Can it not be argued that the requisite legislation didn't even exist to arrest anybody, even if people were found culpable at the time?
No, there were breaches. There were breaches. There were breaches.
There were arrestable breaches?
Yeah, there were breaches where people could have been arrested and charged, yeah, but nobody's been arrested.
But we know why, Afra.
And that is why, and the point I'm coming to you is, that's why the International Financial Center that we keep hearing about is not really, you know, we occasionally, every spasmodically, every 3 or 4 months, you get a little press release about something. No serious financial institution is coming here.
Let's take a break.
You're putting yourself at peril.
Let's take a break and continue, because we wanted to develop a couple more points in relation to this whole issue of public accountability with the budget presentation coming up on October the 7th. It's 6:34 in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be back right after this break.
I call my fans and I call my friends to let them know that if they have a message to send, tell Tempo. And if they come home and they
wouldn't let the poor driver drive in peace. They distracting him and wouldn't cease. While he driving,
6:37 in Trinidad and Tobago. As we take a quick look at Princestown this morning, that triangular area where you see the traffic flowing in different directions. Sun coming up at this early hour of the morning via the camera of traffictt.com. Well, let's return to the camera in studio. The 3 cameras in studio this morning, and with offering us different angles to our discussions this morning with Chartered Surveyor Afra Raymond. And Afra, you wanted to develop the point of affordability, because this is at the very crux, as you were mentioning, in relation to the HDC's mandate, in relation to what it has to do.
Well, the point I wanted to make, Fazeer, thank you again. The point I wanted to make is that there's a skepticism which some viewers may have about what I'm saying about a house for 375 and 400 and 275, and what is he talking about? Is it possible? And I want to take us back, because I think this is what I declare to be my season of reflection. And in the standing of Sankofa, we look back to learn how to properly go forward. And I want to take us back to Dr. Rowley's autobiography, From Mason Hole to Whitehall. And at page 32 of the book, Dr. Rowley talks about how at the age of 8, in 1957 or so, he spent a Christmas with his mom in Trinidad. He'd been living in Tobago with his grandparents. And he went to see his mom at East Dry River, where she was staying at the time, sharing a house with some other people. And he was happy to see his mom for those 2 or 3 weeks. But the living conditions were terrible. He describes it at page 32 and 33 of the book. And he was just happy to be in the loving embrace of his mom, and so on and so on. And then at page 35 of the book, there's a photograph of his mom standing on the balcony, on the porch of her home at Coconut Drive, Moba, near to Coconut Drive, Moba, in about 1975. And the footnote to the photo, Dr. Rowley says, I stayed there in 1970, which means that home would have been built in about 68 or 69 for Keith to have stayed with his mom, Vasi, in 1970. Now, according to that book, that lady, Dr. Rowley's mom, was a cook at the breakfast shed. The point I'm making for viewers who are skeptical, because it's important to understand our history to know what is possible, and then to be able to place proper demands on our public officials today. Back in the 60s, the consciousness and the commitment was such that the houses being produced, which were Coconut Drive, Moba, were being produced at a price point that someone with a modest job, we're not personalizing Dr. Rowley's life story, but this is part of Trinidad and Tobago's story, and it's an important part of the story. We're not scandalizing anybody. I grew up in public housing too with a single mother. Nobody's being scandalized here.
Could I just tell you, I mean, I don't want to bring you personalize it.
Yeah.
But My father was an electrician.
Yes.
My mother was a teacher. We grew up in an NHA house in Baines Avenue in Sawan. It was very, very
I
comfortable.
know Baines Avenue, yeah, off the Saddle Road there. The point being that the NHA, as it was at that time, was able and willing to design and produce homes that was affordable to people in a modest occupation. That was before the oil boom. We've now had an oil boom. We had a gas boom. We've had how many thousands of graduates. The money in the country has grown to a point that if you said to anybody in 68 or 69 the country really this wealthy, they would have said, you're mad, how we will get that amount of money? We have the money, and we appear to have lost our way. Because we now have a situation in 2018 and 2019 and 16 and 17 where it appears that we are unable or unwilling or we don't care to produce homes that are affordable to people in modest occupations. So if you are running the HDC, or you're running the housing ministry, or if you're sitting in the cabinet or you're the head of the cabinet and you cannot tell me that in fact, Afra, you are wrong, the bulk of what we are doing, people who are school teachers, people who are cooks at the breakfast shed, they can afford those homes. If you cannot tell me that, you have lost your way. And if we accept that collectively we have lost our way, we need to return to the meaning of that affordable housing program, which is in fact that it needs to be affordable to people on modest incomes, less than average incomes. It is possible. We need to have the commitment and the consciousness to understand it is possible. And it's not only possible, it is necessary.
Okay, we hear this all the time.
Sure.
We must do this. We need to do that. We need to go back to that. We need to have the commitment. We need to all that sort of thing. But where is it coming from? I mean, while we were at the break, you were receiving all kind of questions from people who are on your WhatsApp thing or whatever.
Sure.
Asking questions. How many of these same people will hold these individuals to account to the extent of standing up and being counted? Or do they want one or two people, an Afra Raymond, or one or two public spirited citizens to do the fight for them?
Yeah. Well, there's that representation riddle at the heart of a lot we do, you know, that in fact people want, they want someone, as David would say,
but they want somebody else to do it.
A godfather, they want someone to handle these things for them. But the point I was driving at is that these things are possible.
I hear you on that, Afra. I hear you that they are possible. Nobody's ever saying that's impossible, you know.
Well, a number of people are, that it's not possible to build a house for that price, and what is he talking about?
That's what I was addressing. I mean, those who are familiar with the industry, those who are aware of the specifics about building not a shack, a modest, decent home, are aware of the reality. So those who saying that talking nonsense, talking through the tail or whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is that when Afra Raymond, are we going to move to the point of beyond just the talk, we need to do this, and we ought to do that, and we must do that, because we've had CLICO 2009, we've gone past the 10th anniversary of CLICO, and still the effects are being felt of it. No one has been brought to account. When are we going to move to the level of holding people to account in a real way, to the extent of changing the way we do things?
Well, that is the reason that I invested the hope I did in the bit before the break, when I made the point about the upcoming procurement law, in that its full proclamation is expected in the next month or so. I know today is Thursday, Cabinet meets on a Thursday, and from what I was told, I was at a briefing 2 or 3 nights ago with the procurement regulator, and from what I was told, today Cabinet is supposed to make certain decisions, in terms of activating the procurement law, because there's a stage of regulation that was submitted to them for review, and that is supposed to be approved now. But in terms of the hiring of staff, it's about 97% of the staff have been hired, and they're virtually ready to go. One of the interesting points, Fazeer, is 2 interesting things. You know, we have presumptions we make, and then whenever we come into contact with reality, we have to revise our presumptions. So 2 of the interesting things the procurement regulator, Mr. Munila Lalchan, told us a couple of nights ago that relate to this question you're asking about our state of preparedness and the impact it will have, is that some of the public bodies that ought to be falling within the umbrella of the procurement law have been trying, I'm going to use my own phrase, everything in the book to say, well, we shouldn't be in that law. And in fact, there has been quite a struggle, which has not really been any, and I wouldn't name the organizations, it has been quite a struggle that has not really been in the press for some organizations to have us have a declaration that they are not part of the procurement law. And it would surprise people to know who some of those organizations are. But so far...
Are you at liberty to call those?
No, I can't do
okay,
that.
all right.
But so far, Mr. Lalchan and his staff and his advisors have been able to prevail. And in fact, everybody who's supposed to be in there remained in there. So that's one thing that we need to be aware of, that some of our public officials have been trying all sorts of legal maneuvers, looking for a loophole. The second thing, which is the kind of flip side of the coin and the paradox of that, is that some private organizations, because one of the things about the rules is that once you are transacting or you're receiving public money, you fall under the law. Some of the private organizations that were on the fringe of the thing and might have been in or out, and some of the public agencies that are more responsible and have more responsible leadership have actually said, you know something, this is not the law yet, but come and do a seminar with us, and we want to bring ourselves fully within law. So everything we're doing from now, even though the law is not in effect yet, we want to start doing it as if the law is there. So when the law comes in, we're not going to have any problems. So some people have been very responsible and forward-looking and have put things in place to have their organization in alignment with the law. And some people have been fighting it every inch along the way, that they don't want to be there. So this question that you're asking about the accomplishment of progress and the accomplishment of transparency and consequence, and so this question would not be achieved without a struggle. And that struggle is going on now in different spheres, including in this discourse and in the media and so on. Yeah.
What about the role of the private sector in all of this? When we talk about the HDC situation and so on, is it that the private sector, whether we're talking about construction builders and so on, should be doing a lot more to be advocating, or is it just that, whether it's affordable or not, it ain't my business. Once the HDC give me the contract, I build in?
Well, there's very little discussion about the affordability question. Many times on that question, I feel like I'm a voice in the wilderness, because I don't really hear many other people talking about the affordability question. It's a word somebody will throw into a conversation. It may appear the first page of the HGC contract, but in a substantive discussion, you get very little of that. So I keep on fighting to make that part of our discussion. I think that I'm also hopeful, apart from the procurement law, I'm also hopeful that the JCC has new leadership, which is a pleasure. It makes me smile this morning. Fazeer Khan, who was a former head of APET, was elected head of JCC at the beginning of June, and is under his leadership that the JCC made the application to HDC to get the contract, which is what people are discussing now. So there's a prospect of a more active and a more involved JCC under the leadership of Engineer Fazeer Khan, and I'm pleased about that as well. We have just a couple of minutes left, Afra, and therefore, given all of that and the points you've raised and your emphasis on affordability and HDC and so on, are you at this point in your own existence as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, would you describe yourself as hopeful? Would you, how would you place yourself as far as governance in Trinidad and Tobago? Well, I'm nervous, because what has me nervous is that the next year is an election, and there's a whole lot of things that take place just before elections, including a lot of confusion. So I expect, if we think we're in a confused situation now, between allegations and counter-allegations and froth and rumors and bizarre things, I think the next 12 months is going to be absolutely frantic with all of that. So I'm trying to kind of stabilize myself and keep my eyes on a few targets and so on. I wouldn't describe myself as optimistic. I'd say nervous. Afra Raymond, thanks very much for taking the time to be with us. And hopefully you have enough nerve tablets to keep you at least on a fairly even keel. Not tablets, I take care. Okay. Right. Let me leave that alone for the moment. 6:49, approaching 6:50 in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for you. Then he tied them up in buns that he